Do you see common mistakes that people make as business owners around that trademarking space?
Yeah. So, and you certainly, I do a lot of trademarking work both here in New Zealand and overseas. So, just filing through the World Intellectual Property Office. And probably the main mistakes I see is not having a proper strategy from the outset. So, thinking carefully about, if IP is absolutely critical to your business, should that be sitting in your trading company, or should you be setting up a holding company that just holds the IP just for asset protection? Thinking about those sorts of things just from the outset, and particularly, you can use the example of a software company, and if you stick all the IP into a holding company and the trading company sells all that software to consumers, well, 9 times out of 10 your consumers are going to go against the trading company for any liability that arises out of that. So it kind of just creates a natural hedge and a protection in that way. So having a think about that sort of thing, and then just generally perhaps trading when you haven't got the rights to use that name, so being caught up, particularly for startups, this can catch them out where they come up with an amazing slogan or amazing brand that you're using, and then actually it's in use in the market already.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to this week's podcast. We've got a new spin on an old topic, and it's around employment, and it's we've got a lawyer, so don't judge him yet. But how you going, Duncan?
Yeah, really good. How you doing, Ryan? Yeah.
Decent, mate. Decent. I've heard that you've had a few changes over the COVID period. I'll be interested in that just to kick it off. Like, you're talking about how people are more open to Zoom and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. So, obviously it's a very sort of strange period of life that we're in. And certainly in terms of client interactions and stuff that we're seeing from people we deal with on a daily basis, it's been quite refreshing just because instead of your normal sort of telephone calls where it's kind of a little bit more impersonal, we're finding that clients are just inviting us to team meetings, Zoom meetings. Zooming's now a verb officially, and so it's just really interesting having that sort of more face-to-face sort of connection with our clients, and that's kind of been one of the more, obviously COVID on a whole was a bit of a bleak event to be going through, but that's one of the more positive sort of silver linings that we've had, just in terms of on a day-to-day sort of basis, just being able to have that sort of human, personal interaction has been great. So
there'd be some times where you wish they didn't Zoom call you.
Yeah, exactly. When when you're not quite prepared for us, particularly when you're working from home, you just chucked on an old T-shirt, and all of a sudden you get a Zoom call or a Teams call coming through. You have to quickly whack on a jacket and try and look professional. But
shorts and flip-flops, mate.
Shorts under the table, of course.
Yeah, good call. Yeah. Well, people would be interested as well. Like your accent's confusing.
Yeah,
tell us your origin story there.
Yeah, that's a polite way of putting it. I'm a bit of a mongrel overall with my accent. So I was actually born in South Africa, lived there till I was 4. And then actually after that, lived in an extremely random place called St. Helena. So I lived there from the ages of 4 through till 13. And that island is in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, right.
Remote. So it's right in between Africa and South America, basically. And so,
like Castaway, were you out there hunting with spears?
Pretty much, yeah. So it had electricity, had its basics and all the rest of it. But I mean, it's about 3/4 the size of Waiheke Island, for example. So tiny.
Wow.
But it's a beautiful place to grow up. Stunning scenery, crystal clear waters, volcanic, so not like white sandy beaches, but like black sandy beaches. But a beautiful place. Kind of looks a bit like Piha sort of area. Lived, and that was great as a kid. Just freedom, outdoors, amazing weather all year round, and then biggest culture shock really was moving to London after that. Went there when I was 13, like I said, went to school there properly for the first time at that age, worked my way through the uni systems and all the rest of it, and became a lawyer. So yeah. Why
became a lawyer? Because I've met a lot of people and they've been lawyers or doctors, and like there's something. Sometimes it's something they're trying to prove, or maybe they're because it's quite, shall we say, a challenging subject to stay focused on.
Yeah.
What was the driver to get into law?
Yeah, so again, a bit of a personal reason behind it, I suppose. Is so on that island, funnily enough, I was one of the first witnesses on a hit-and-run accident, which actually ended up with a fatality.
Shit.
And so I was the first kind of person to come across this. This was probably, I can't remember my exact age, would have been when I was 10 or something like that. And so I had to be involved in the whole sort of police interviewing process and all that sort of stuff. So from a really early age, quite frankly, was probably quite enjoying all the centre of attention at the time, but no, it wasn't really. But it was just really interesting going through the sort of court process and all that sort of stuff, and that kind of really first piqued my interest in law. But then discovered very quickly as I grew up, I was getting more and more squeamish with the stuff. So I was kind of not interested in criminal law anymore, which is kind of what I was thinking of initially. And also realised I just didn't have the science brains in my family that had been dished out to everyone else in handsome proportions. And so, in terms of forensic science, which was kind of what I wanted to do, I put that on the back burner and got more involved in and interested in stuff like politics, rather sadly, and just commercial and business stuff generally. And so, being able to put those two things together ultimately, leads to a bit of a melting pot in commercial law, and discovered pretty quickly that law plays a massive part in society. Not only on the sort of criminal elements that we were talking about earlier, but just when you walk around, you see brands. Those have to be trademarked. They're important for goodwill, for businesses to be able to sell their products. So there's so many things that law touches on, which we just see every day, which we kind of almost take for granted these days. And it's just it was that sort of thinking and stuff that just really inspired me to become a commercial lawyer. So stuck it out, and here I am.
Inspired by something that wasn't about money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, see, not all lawyers are about it.
No, I'm actually learning that.
But maybe I've changed.
Yeah, maybe he's putting it on a front, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know. We'll find out over the next 30 minutes. But on that trademark thing, I'd be interested. Do you see common mistakes that people make as business owners around that trademarking space? Yeah.
So, and you certainly, I do a lot of trademarking work both here in New Zealand and overseas. So, just filing through the World Intellectual Property Office. Probably the main mistakes I see is not having a proper strategy from the outset. So, thinking carefully about, if IP is absolutely critical to your business, should that be sitting in your trading company, or should you be setting up a holding company that just holds the IP just for asset protection, basically, corporate asset protection? Those sorts of thinking about those sorts of things just from the outset, and particularly you can use the example of a software company, and if you stick all the IP into a holding company, and the trading company sells all that software to consumers, well, 9 times out of 10 your consumers are going to go against the trading company for any liability that arises out of that software. So it kind of just creates a natural hedge and a protection in that way. So having a think about that sort of thing, and then just generally, perhaps trading with when you haven't got the rights to use that name. So being caught up, particularly for startups, this can catch them out where they come up with an amazing slogan or amazing brand that you're using, and then actually it's in use in the market already. And so having spent a lot of, particularly where cash is important, at the early stages in particular, spending a lot of time in branding and marketing when actually you haven't got that clearance to operate and use that brand. So, and it's really frustrating when you get another company sending you a snotty letter from a lawyer. Saying, "Hey, stop using our."
Have you ever written those letters?
I've written plenty of them.
How do you what in those letters? How do you get the outcome you want?
Yeah, so actually, it's really interesting. So there's not. I say snotty letter, but actually, it's.
You're tweaking it now.
You do have to play it to the particular business that you're to the client you're acting for, and to the business you're writing this letter to, and you'll be surprised at how a tailored approach makes a massive difference. So in some situations, actually sending a really friendly, hey, look, it's great that you can see the value in our name, but really, you shouldn't be doing this sort of thing. And a classic example of this that hit the press about 2 years ago was sort of that Stranger Things, on Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
So some person in America had set up a stall, and they were selling basically knockoff merchandise and all the rest of it. And Netflix's lawyers just wrote this amazing letter to them, referencing all these in jokes from the series itself, and it was just a really friendly tone. And so if you adapt to your audience in that way as well, you actually often get a far better outcome than you think. But there is a time for when, and actually 9 times out of 10 you do write that sort of harder, firmer letter. But again, it's the key is just being sensible around it, right? So particularly if it's a business that's just started and that sort of thing, just saying, look, we own the rights in this, but. Look, we're not going to come down hard on you. We're going to give you 4 weeks to rebrand. Now's the time to do it before you spend any more money on it. And just being sensible about it as well. Often make sure you get the solution that your client wants. So
fair. All right. I've always found that even if it's a tense, or I guess it's in a sense you're causing a cost to someone, if you do it in a way that's tailored and in a way that they understand. You can honey. I don't know the saying, something to do with honey attracts more flies.
Something
like that.
Yeah. In terms of other sort of trademarking issues, I think in particular just thinking about your markets. So often, businesses will register a trademark here in New Zealand and think they're protected overseas, whereas they're not. And there's some jurisdictions that are particularly sort of troublesome. So China is one of them, for example, where trademark squatting is pretty prevalent and rife. So you'll get people who look at trademarks that have been registered overseas, and then have they been registered in China? No, so they're going to quickly get one in, and it's whoever gets in first in China. That's what's important. Effectively, bad faith registration it doesn't exist, so you can just register, and then you're basically blocking them from coming into the market unless they pretty much pay you a handsome fee, or you can challenge it in other ways, which is going to take time. It's going to incur lots of legal costs, and so again, just having a think and a strategy around that in terms of, okay, look, what markets are we going in? Let's try and protect in those first, and get in there.
It seems like nearly every profession I come across, it seems to be strategy is the one of the core things that they provide. There'd be a number of listeners that might be a bit confused from some of the terminology, like bad faith.
Sorry. So in terms of that just means registering, in this particular context, registering a trademark when you know you're not going to use it yourself. So you've got no interest, for example, in Tesla as a brand. And this is an example that actually happened in China. So you just had an individual who registered a trademark for Tesla. He doesn't sell cars. He doesn't sell Tesla cars. He's got no interest in doing so. But he registered and blocked Tesla from being able to come in. And eventually that was settled. And no one knows if it was settled for financial compensation, but I think you can probably read between the lines and say this guy wouldn't have just withdrawn or signed that trademark to Tesla for nothing. So
I heard this story in a backpacker, so I don't know how legitimate it is.
100%, of course.
Yeah, it's facts. But they talked about the Burger King name in Australia.
Yeah.
And some guy owned it.
Yeah.
And then he was asking for too much, and then Burger King's like, "Oh, stuff it. We'll just call it Hungry Jack's."
Yeah, because I've always wondered why it's called Hungry Jack's over there. And I thought it just has to get in my natural legal brain. It's like, this must be some sort of trademark issue going on with this. So there you go. Maybe that's it. Maybe now I know.
I'm going to use you as...
It
is, yeah. I'm going to use you as legitimacy now, even though you can't confirm it. But there was another thing, what was quite interesting you were talking about off air was about with COVID and like the implications for a business. And a lot of people aren't quite sure. Wage subsidy, what's the best thing to do, the concerns.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit more on that point?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a whole bunch of different initiatives that the government's introduced, obviously, and the wage subsidy is one of those. And so, there's now been 3 rounds of wage subsidies. So you had the initial one during the March lockdown, that came up just before that. And then there was an extension to it, and then the resurgence wage subsidy as well, slightly different qualifying parameters as between the original wage subsidy and then the 2 that followed. And that's all helpful stuff that was out there. It still obviously doesn't cover all your business's costs. It's still a really tough time for particularly your small businesses who are in the retail space, for example, particularly tourism. I mean, you're just taking absolutely hammering at the moment. And on the wage subsidy stuff, it's now's a really good time to actually look back, particularly for the first wage subsidy, and say, having taken it, do we still qualify for it? Because a number of businesses might have found that actually their trading during the activity wasn't as bad as they thought it would be. So if they haven't hit that sort of 30% threshold in terms of reduction of revenue, now's the time to look at your financial figures and see, hey, do we actually have to pay this wage subsidy back, or did we? We're now satisfied that we still qualify, and it's better to do that before you're audited.
Okay.
Because the government is working through an audit process at the moment. I've heard sort of anecdotally they're focusing on looking at all the companies that took large amounts of wage subsidies, which makes perfect sense. Focus on the big fish first, and going to slowly be working their way down. So, but certainly, it's better to have looked at that, get your paperwork in order to say, look, this is why we applied for it. Having reviewed it post 30th of June, we're still satisfied that we should keep it, and here are the reasons why, and having all your financials and your numbers and all the rest of it come into it. We're lawyers, don't want to get involved, but look, now's the time to do it, because it's better to do it now rather than a government auditor coming in and saying, hey, show us why you qualified for the wage subsidy and you can't do it, or you go through that process and realize, actually, we don't qualify anymore. I mean, that would just be pretty not a great situation. So
no, is that the only red flag around not having that 30% revenue drop?
Yeah, that's the main one, I'd say, and that's probably the one that's going to catch most out. And on the whole, just because lockdown did happen. It happened. It had a massive impact on businesses, and so on the whole, those businesses who applied for the wage subsidy, most of them would be absolutely fine, and they would have done so also because they knew the impact it would have on them, and that impact has followed through. I think the other sort of red flag, just generally in taking the wage subsidy and all the rest of it, particularly if you applied after the 27th of March, because there's a difference. The government tweaked the original wage subsidy slightly. So if you took the wage subsidy after the 27th of March, you basically were under an obligation you had to retain all your staff after that for the rest of the wage subsidy period. Whereas if you applied pre-27th of March, you just had to basically use your best efforts too. And so that's important, because when it comes to making restructures and stuff in the business, which you might legitimately have to do now, you may be faced with, you may have had to have waited until that wage subsidy period expired before actually exiting anyone from the business. So it's those sorts of things as well that businesses need to think about, and certainly that obligation to retain staff applies generally under the wage subsidy schemes. So.
Do you think it's just that time period of which the wage is being paid?
Yeah, during the wage, for the period of the wage subsidy.
They can wait 6 weeks.
Exactly.
I mean, I know it'd be messy, but
yeah. And what you can do is go through if you really need to make a restructure, you can go through the process, set it all up, and then actually make sure that employees are only terminated after the wage subsidy date. So you can still set it up.
12:01.
Yeah, exactly. Send to all. Yeah.
Oh, brutal.
So there's ways around it, even then, if you are a struggling business and you need to, do what you need to do. So
I imagine there'll be a lot of people caught out in that. There's also lending instruments that business owners can use as well.
Yeah. So the government's introduced favourable lending terms and all the rest of it, and there's a number of other sort of economic response packages they've put together. I don't think there's been a massive, from what I understand. I know I might be wrong on this. Again, lawyers and numbers, you know what they say about those two mixing, but I don't think there's been a massive sort of uptake in that scheme. And particularly, I think it's the same for other things that the government's introduced, like the debt hibernation schemes and all the rest of it. And the debt hibernation scheme, is when directors can effectively pass a resolution to enter into an agreement with their creditors to temporarily put a pause on obligations that they otherwise would have had to meet to their creditors. But it doesn't. All it does is delay debt. It doesn't actually get rid of it. It's not like a creditor compromise or anything like that. And so it's still not really that helpful to businesses, because having entered into a debt hibernation scheme, all of a sudden you're going to get suppliers and customers who are worried. So actually your business is probably still going to have an impact, even though you're trying to protect it. Suppliers might dry up from giving you what you need to run your business, because they're thinking, you're in debt hibernation. Or,
how do they find that out?
After the directors pass a resolution, and then assuming then there's effectively 30-day period. After that, you enter into an agreement with 75% of the creditors by number and value, and once that's whatever you agree with those creditors, that's eventually filed at the company's office, and so you can see
online.
It's currently in debt hibernation. So,
a supplier sitting there refreshing that button every day?
No, they wouldn't be, but.
It's possible.
Particularly with New Zealand, I mean, the thing that's interesting is that's small industries, right? So you always hear on the grapevine, hey, have you heard about such and such? And so word can travel pretty fast on that. So,
true.
Yeah.
You'd have to lean into that, because, I mean, Chinese whisper is pretty bad. Things tend to inflate. So if you lean in that resistance and, grab the bull by his horns.
Yeah.
I think in that instance, it's not as bad, but I imagine their interest is still on the so that doesn't go away.
No, exactly. And the other thing that you have to remember during this very strange period of life, 2020 has been very odd, but there's a feeling that everyone's kind of in this together. Everyone knows it's a challenging time, and so you've got that sort of stuff to weigh off against it as well. So
it's true.
Yeah.
So what about your day-to-day prior to lockdown? I mean, so in your role, what's, I guess, the main point of difference or things that you focus on that adds value to your clients?
So sorry, in terms of...
just what's the majority of your work focused around?
Yeah, so pre-lockdown, there was probably a lot more of the nicer stuff, shall we say. So it was, putting steps in place for businesses, whether it's for investments, lots of investment coming in, or whether on the employment side, whether it was things like making sure all the policies and all that sort of stuff was correct for clients. And then probably post-lockdown, I think what we're finding is that there's far more sort of disputes arising between commercial parties. So lots of shareholder disputes that we're dealing with at the moment. And then on the employment side again, we're starting to see a few more restructures floating through now and coming through. So that's and a lot more personal grievances, all that sort of stuff's starting to come through. But I mean, so you're seeing disputes both at that sort of level, but also generally between businesses as they try to, for either for tactical reasons or for genuine reasons, they're trying to ensure. They're just trying to preserve their position and protect it, and in some cases delay not having to pay things, maybe using the dark arts, and so starting to see a lot more of those things, and it's and disputes between shareholders is really interesting as well, because it's all well and good while things are nice and rosy and lots of money's coming in and things are great. The relationship between shareholders often isn't put to the test that much during that period, and it's when things get a bit more trickier in the wider market they can start seeing certain behaviours or actions arising which causes concern between the parties, and then all of a sudden it escalates a lot more because you've got wider tensions to deal with, like the business is struggling and not doing as well as it was, and all those sorts of things surface and can cause issues for businesses. And so, we've been surprised at the number of shareholders disputes we've seen coming throughout boards at the moment. So
I imagine there'll be instances where there aren't shareholders disputes and there are shareholders disputes. Do you see themes between the ones that work it out and the ones that don't? Yeah,
so I think that kind of comes down to what I was saying to you earlier. Of course, when lawyers get involved, there's always going to be a bit of a bun fight as between who's going to trying to preserve your client's position, doing the best you can for them to make sure they get the commercial outcome they want. But ultimately, it's just about just looking at the parties and being sensible about it, and understanding what the other side wants, understanding what your client wants, and often there's a deal to be made. And certainly, I mean, on one of the disputes I acted on, it was a co-founder for a business that had been around for a number of years. It wasn't in any financial difficulty or anything like that. It was just a natural sort of parting of the ways, kind of driven a bit by COVID, but the business was doing well. But both parties were just relatively sensible about it. And, within 3 days, we had everything sorted on the shareholding front and on the employment side, and both parties were just like, "Yep, all the best. See you later," and so moved on because they were sensibly represented by both sides, and that can only be good for the business going forward. It can only be good for the business, the individual going out, because it's extremely stressful when you're in any dispute, and it takes time, it takes cost to yourself personally, financially, and so. The sooner parties can come to a sensible resolution, the better, really. So,
I mean, makes sense. Yeah. I was thinking as well, so when you watch the movies about the lawyers, I'm just bringing the IQ down. It's facts.
It's exactly like Suits and
that's what I was going to say. Is it you don't have to name names, but is there sometimes lawyers that you're coming across and you're like, "Oh, this is going to be a hard one"?
Oh, for sure.
Is there ones where you look forward to it as well?
Oh, yeah. Because we all enjoy a bit of a fight, right? A bit of an intellectual sort of dispute and a battle. It's good fun as well. But look, like I said earlier, the New Zealand industry is pretty small, and that's the same in the legal industry. So there's definitely a few names you come across, and you're like, so all right, which is pretty interesting, but then it's good because you'll come across a lot and you're like, oh, okay, look, I know this person's sensible, and so it's and you can also just have a bit more of a frank discussion with them, knowing that you can be even more free with your discussions with some people than otherwise, because they're a sensible and reasonable operator, and
there'd be some nitpickers though as well. Mate, like the real proper ones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, So initially you started with the criminal law and you flowed into the more commercial side. Is what in your role now that you love about it?
So for me, it's just coming across different business owners. I mean, it's just we've got such a broad selection of clients. I've advised so many different types of businesses, and it's great just understanding what they do, how they do it, why they're passionate about it, and how they're passionate about it. And so really that's the key, is it's just such good fun just coming across such a wide variety of individual and businesses. So really enjoy that side of thing. And often, sadly, people do come to lawyers when issues have arisen, and from a very sort of sad perspective, I actually quite enjoy the troubleshooting side of it. So it's really good fun
solving
having something that comes in that's an issue and that can be complex to solve, and sitting down, figuring out a strategy, and coming up with how to resolve it. And there's a great satisfaction in that as well. So but the main thing is the people you deal with. There's some real characters and some real fun, interesting businesses. So
there's some free spirits. Business
absolutely.
owners. Well, that's why they're business owners. They don't know how to work for someone else. All right. Well, it's interesting. What about the things you don't enjoy? Because Gary Vee talks about the marketing guru. He talks about hire people that are good at jobs you don't like.
Yeah.
What do you not like about it?
What do I not like? Look, I think...
Speak freely.
Yeah, sometimes, it comes, when you're talking about the nitpicky and stuff like that earlier, that can get a bit wearing sometimes. This really doesn't make a difference if you move one word here or the other when you're negotiating, for example, a settlement agreement with the other side.
Is that strategy to settle you?
No.
Make it hard?
Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just frustrating having to, because you're just like, look, it just doesn't matter, you know what I mean? So it doesn't change the meaning of this clause, but that's one of the things you just have to work through, and it takes up your time, it takes up your client's time, and it can just be a bit frustrating. And then of course there's just the general sort of more admin things of law that can be a bit annoying. Look, anti-money laundering regulations are always...
tell me about it.
You'll exactly face this as well. But again, it's just finding ways to deal with those elements that are a bit more frustrating, shall we say. And so we just use a third-party provider that seamlessly does all of our AML stuff now.
Nice.
It's just really takes out a lot of the pain on that sort of front. So clients certainly prefer that as well. But no, other than that, I love my job. I'm passionate about law, and got great colleagues, got a great team. I walk into work with knowing it's going to be a good fun day almost every day. Yeah, there's some days where you're just like, oh, dear me, I'd rather be out playing golf or playing football or something else. But but no, look, it's a job I enjoy and I love. So there's not many negatives to it, I'd say, at all.
That's rare.
Yeah,
same for me. So it's good to meet someone who's on that level. I was thinking as well, well, I lost the complete train of thought there, Duncan, but we'll pull it together. Yeah. But I was thinking more on the side. So normally when you come across, when you're doing the law work that you are, sometimes maybe there's a strategy side, but at the moment it's around the disputes. It was really, you might not necessarily have transparency over this, but I always find it interesting to learn from others' mistakes and understanding why some businesses succeed and why others don't. And I imagine you come across that.
Yeah.
Is there a theme or situations that you see within an organization, okay, this seems like it's going to do well because it reminds me of this pattern? What would you say?
Yeah, I think with any business, it's just knowing. One of the keys is that can just be lost is just knowing your customer, right? So it's just and if you, I know it sounds cliche to say all that sort of stuff, but and it's the same with us. Us knowing our clients, what they want to hear from us, how do they want our message delivered to them, and that sort of thing. And if you lose track of that, you could have all the best tech in your business. You can have all the best. Everything else, but then if you're not focusing on that, that's our lifeblood, and so the moment you lose sight of that, and you may have 5 other strategies for growth and all the rest of it, but you just have to prioritize on your customers, and that, and in terms of the current context we're in terms of COVID stuff. That's just a key as well, is because you get most of your work from your existing client base, and so it's really focusing on that is critical. But of course, the strategic side of it is absolutely vital as well. So, how's the business tracking now against where it should be going? And what's your short term, what's your long term plans for it? All that sort of stuff. And you'll find that businesses generally that are well organized will, generally speaking, do well. And certainly you can see that on corporate acquisitions, for example. If we're acting for a purchaser on a business, and you come into a business, you're doing your due diligence on it, and contracts are all over the place, either not signed or just not in place. There's just information that's ad hoc, financial or otherwise, just again scattered. What that equals is a reduction in value, and because the purchaser's going to come into that thinking this is a complete mess. How do we deal with this? And so, whereas if you come into a process like that, you can see a business that's well run, that has everything set up very clearly. It just gives you a lot of confidence, and that just translate generally. If your house is in order, when it comes to a corporate acquisition sort of side of things, then generally speaking, it's probably going to have been ordered before that, and it's going to have been well run, and so it's all that sort of organizational stuff, which is critical as well. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. One of the interesting things we were talking about just off air earlier as well was just generally what businesses can be doing now to help sort of shore up what they're facing at the moment with COVID. And like I said, focusing on your customers, one of those things. But cash flow is absolutely critical at the moment as well. So looking at your standard terms and conditions for with your customers, do you need to bring your payment deadlines forward? Do you need to? You certainly need to keep a closer eye on debtors, for example. If you've got bad debts, those really need to be chased up. The longer you leave it, the less likely you are to be paid, quite frankly. Do you need to start asking for money in advance from certain customers? Those are the sorts of questions that businesses in the current environment should be sort of thinking about. And similarly, making sure that your supplies there's a good supply chain as well. So if you rely on something that's critical, and maybe it comes from New Zealand, maybe it comes from overseas, you want to be sure that you either got a second source or that's still going to be unaffected by further COVID outbreaks that happen either here in New Zealand or overseas. And so just focusing on those sort of things is important as well. And just to use a funny example, at our office during the first lockdown, we were scrambling around trying to find printers for people to use at home, and making sure printing paper's all purchased and cartridges for ink, and all that sort of stuff, because actually that was just selling out like crazily. So all that sort of stuff, making sure your suppliers are all in track as well, is pretty critical as well. And then just obviously looking after your people as well. So and particularly in COVID at the moment, you've got individuals who've been working from home a lot, and so first of all, are they able to do the job in comfort that they need to? So have they got a decent? So that's really easy to watch all the 1 p.m. sort of news briefings and just be completely wrapped up in it, and to become anxious about it. And it's also just taking a step back and having a deep breath and focusing on other things that you really do enjoy, your hobbies, whether it's photography, whether it's sport, whether whatever it might be. So there's that sort of element of it as well. That's pretty critical.
True. I mean, I always just I begrudgingly listen to the business news. That's about it. In the morning, it's 7 minutes.
Yeah.
But it is. You just think about the news, what narrative they need to sell. It's like the quote, is the world getting worse, or they're just more newspapers? Yeah. So you have to sell the idea of fear, and you're buying into that. So So some people might not have the luxury that you and I have on finding what they love. And you've seen the extremes of people that have everything. Yeah. Like successful CEOs that are unhappy. Is it I guess differences you see between the people that know what they want and what they enjoy? I know this is getting a bit airy-fairy. And people that don't, or like a system you would use on helping people find direction in their career? Or?
Yeah, look, I won't help myself out as a lifestyle coach or anything like that, but
just curious.
But I do see a difference between the two, and I suppose the key difference is for those. There's some individuals you come across and some business owners when it's almost as if they don't know they're running a business. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a completely positive way, because they're doing really well. They're running it really well, but they don't actually know they're doing it, because for them, it's almost like a hobby that they're doing it. Oh, right. So it's just something that they really enjoy. Like they're really passionate about a particular product that they're dealing with and launching and selling to consumers. And so, of course, they're going to get tired, like we all do, as it's busy and all the rest of it. And it can sap your time and your energy and all that sort of stuff, but they're just really positive about it, because it's almost like they don't see it like work. I can't remember who said it. Might have been Confucius or someone like that, but it was like, look, if you find a job you love, you'll basically never work. It was something along those lines, paraphrasing.
Never work a day in your life.
Alan
Watts, maybe?
I
want to say Alan Watts, but I'm not sure.
But so it's that sort of idea and mentality that you do see coming through, and so that's probably what I'll say about that. But
all right, cool. Yeah. Well, the other thing as well, see, I sort of see corporates. There seems to be a lot of inefficiencies and lack of agility. And do you see things? I guess obviously you talk about systems, processes, and that's a way that's independent from the people. Yeah. Do you see things that work more effectively in a corporate and things that don't?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and particularly, I think there's no reason for any business in the corporate sort of space where it's services related in particular, why things can't be streamlined and run better than they are. And it's important that you do so, because that allows you to, using the example of lawyers, for example. I mean, if we can streamline and automate certain processes that can be automated and streamlined, then that's great, because it frees us up to provide more strategic advice to our clients, and that's certainly something we work hard at our firm to do. So, rather than sort of the more mundane element, because there are mundane elements of law.
Really?
Shock horror.
Yeah. Surprise.
But being able to automate those and to advise on other stuff that's sort of just in that advisory space is just it's really helpful to your client. That's where you really add the value, and so it's absolutely critical. And you do see a difference between that as well. So
that's where I see the mistakes with automation is people use automation as direct to consumer. Whereas automation should allow you to go more personalized. Okay, let's say with all your talent and skill and your chosen competency, if you could create either the perfect corporate or business, what would be all the things that you would set up and structure from a strategic law
So first of all, client onboarding, I'd make sure that's absolutely sort of seamless, because it is painful when you get a new client in, they're like, I have to do what? I have to come in and see you and get my passport, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So just having that absolutely seamless, so it's almost not even an issue. Automated engagement letters, which we have to send out. I'm sure you have to send out as well. All that sort of stuff would just be really good. And other things that I think, in terms of, I'm keen to see in terms of what we do is having just visibility with clients as well, in terms of what. So if we're working on a big transaction with them, for example, acquisition of a company, for them to be able to see in real time how fees are tracking along, in terms of what estimates we've given them, where we are in the project. Have we just signed the heads of terms, or are we at the stage where we're finally have we agreed the terms of the shareholders agreement? Has it been signed? Of the share purchase agreement, has it been signed? Where are we in terms of the ancillary documents that give effect to the transaction? So if clients could track that in a sort of really clear, meaningful way, whether it's a traffic light system, green, amber, red, that would just be great if all of that could be automated as well. I'd love to see that. So I think it's things like that in terms, and obviously for lawyers, it's our document management and our the documents that we actually use are absolutely critical, because if we're able to find documents very easily that have a particularly complex clause that we know we've drafted previously, being able to have a very clever system that finds that very easily would be critical as well. And so
that's
even on the sort of that document management side, so, and there are a few out there. I mean, certainly, in the States and the US, in the States and the UK, there's law firms that are investing heavily in AI and that sort of stuff. So it's really interesting just seeing some of the stuff coming out of that. You've got some AI capabilities, which particularly in the States, where they're able to basically try and predict which way a judge will make a decision in a court case based on all the previous decisions he's made, by feeding that into so it's really into machine learning processes, and so it's stuff like that's just really, really interesting as well, to try and predict the outcome of litigation. So it's incredible, some of the stuff that's going on, and big money being thrown at it. So so we will see a lot of changes in the legal profession over the next 10 years on that, I think.
No doubt. I mean, the Salesforce is the CRM we use, and they have something called Einstein Analytics, and it can do that. It can project and like a fortune teller in a sense. Because the thing is, we have around 250 clients, so we don't have a large data set, but we have a very intimate data set, so 30 years of knowing this individual. And I feel like if we can utilize technology, because the great and bad thing about New Zealand is we're a bit slow to start something. So if you're innovating in the technological space and still allowing to do the personalizations, it's a huge point of difference. Because for us, so either we're competing against a corporate or we're competing against boutique. So a corporate will be able to have economies of scale, low price, and that sort of thing. The boutique can go more personalized, but they might not be big enough to be able to have a Salesforce application. So if we can merge those two worlds. But so most of this conversation, I've been just trying to keep up. It's quite a unique avenue that I haven't really seen much. I haven't even worked for a corporate, I don't think. I made a Countdown when I was 18. That counts. But what would be your, I guess, closing remarks or important things that you just feel either during this time that business owners should know, or just in general that's something that from your competency that you want to leave on?
Yeah, so I think, one of the more interesting things I was looking at recently was just people actually setting up far more businesses this year in the current sort of climate as well, which is really interesting. So I think if you look at June, I think it was something like there was 5,500 businesses were incorporated at the company's office, and that was an increase of something like 1,500 from the previous June, so June 2019. That's quite a significant increase.
It is, yeah.
Which would suggest people, just thinking, okay, perhaps people have lost jobs and they're looking to get into whether it's a franchise system or just setting up their own business anyway, just from scratch, whatever it might be. There's people have been a bit more entrepreneurial out there, which is really interesting. And so, in that sort of context, I think it's knowing who you're going into business with. If that's what you're doing, if you're not doing it alone, that's just going to be absolutely critical for you. You want to make sure that you trust the person you're going into business with, that you've got the same objectives, you care about the same things, you have the same sort of strategic plan for your business, and what you want from it. And then making sure your governance around that is adequately put in place as well. So shareholders agreements, constitutions for companies, all those sorts of things, making sure that's all teed up. And so, I think that's just something else that's a trend that's sort of come out recently that I found pretty interesting in terms of what's going on in the wider market. I think in the meantime, it's otherwise those things we discussed earlier. So just to recap and summarize on those, looking after your cash flow is going to be absolutely critical. Chasing your debtors down, all that sort of stuff. Looking after your people and looking after your customers is going to be critical. And of course, there will be we're mindful that there's going to be a lot of pain for a lot of businesses, and there already is a lot of pain for a lot of businesses out there as well. So there will be some tough decisions that have to be made, and trying to navigate your way through those can be difficult and complex as well. So the earlier, there's a sales pitch. I feel like I'm starting to say that a little bit, but the earlier you get that legal advice, and it's just critical that you do so, because that's going to help you navigate your way through those issues rather than having to dig your way out of a problem. So there's the positive side of things, which in terms of making sure your shareholders agreement's all in place if you're setting up a business, and making sure you don't enter into a dispute later down the line. I mean, that's the bit of law work and the job that lawyers do that people often lose sight of. Our job is to keep people out of court. But then things do go wrong, and so when that does happen, again, the earlier you can get your advice on that and get a good advisor, the better on that front as well. So. And ultimately, people and businesses and employees, I'm finding they all want to do the right thing here as well, generally speaking. So they've been very sensible in their dealings with each other. Whether it's coming to negotiating temporary salary reductions, for example. I've been through a consultation process for a number of clients. Some of them involving numerous employees, 30 plus. So there's been a number of situations in that context, and all the employees have just been incredibly sensible about it, which is quite refreshing. And we know, as business owners, we know it's difficult for employees to be going through that, and but certainly, they understand the difficulties that employers are facing at the moment as well. So there's kind of a sense that we're all in this together as well, which is still really good. People are definitely a lot more fatigued about COVID. Certainly speaking from my experience, I definitely am as well. Just, every time you hear COVID on the news, it's like, oh dear, not COVID again. So there is that fatigue that's setting in as well. But ultimately, I think everyone's resolved to try and make life as enjoyable and as normal as possible, despite the difficulties and challenges we're facing. So.
Wow, good. Who would have thought a lawyer's good at closing? I like the quote Jeffrey Hughes says when you were talking about having things set up the right way is it's better to build a fence at the top of the hill than clean the mess up at the bottom. Absolutely, yeah. And also on the side of chasing up, like keeping that cash flow going and chasing up people that owe you money. Greg, he told a story on one of the podcasts where this person wasn't paying. Yeah. So he turned up payphone back in those days, called them from the payphone outside their office. They're like, oh, can I speak to such and such? Yeah. He watched your receptionist go and tell him, and the guy said no. And then she's like, oh, sorry, can't talk now. And then Greg said, "Oh, look, I'm on the payphone outside. I can actually see him there, so I'll just pop in quickly." And then he got it done. So I don't think people go to that level these days.
Yeah.
So on that note, I hope people got value out of it, and I'll make sure to have your details in the description. And there'll be definitely people out there that are other employees in a corporate that want to have an understanding around that space, and then also the people that hear this on LinkedIn, they'll be thinking, oh, well, maybe I should think ahead and have that strategic thing, because you don't want to be the mess at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah.
And also to acknowledge, Duncan kept his composure, but there was a courier that just walked around like he was carrying some big rock and just stomped it on the ground, and then everyone started yelling at each other. So if there's editing that needs to be done by Jordan, don't judge him. It's the courier. And also, Duncan, kept your composure. So thanks for that.
No, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been great fun. Yeah,
no dramas.